Well, thank you very much for joining us. I'm Duncan Bradley, Head of Product Marketing here at V2 Cloud. It is my distinct pleasure to be joined by Kevin Hare, Product Owner. We have the distinct pleasure of introducing you to V2 Cloud's recently released block storage capabilities. So, what's really important to appreciate is block storage brings a lot of new capabilities and solves for additional use cases, but best viewed in context of the overall storage program and paradigm and broader offerings that V2 Cloud delivers. Right, so it adds key data resilience, disaster recovery, regulatory compliance, archiving, and we'll get into the details in a minute. But within the existing storage opportunities that we provide, it really helps companies elevate to create holistic data protection frameworks with policy-driven data protection. And of course, any of our clients that want to connect with us on this, we're happy to consult, provide some best practice about what those frameworks and policy-driven data protection looks like. Before we get into some of the specific details of the use cases and the value delivered, I thought there's really important to just lay everything out in context between the various use cases, between the different storage technologies that are being used, and then some of the details around how that storage is deployed and the pricing. Right, so first off, just to recognize what we were already providing, NVMe storage for your hot data, right? Absolutely meeting client requirements. However, there were some limitations, right? One is the cost. Because it is solid state storage, it's quite expensive. And we did have a 300 gigabyte size limit, right? For additional storage if you so wanted. However, it's very high performance and it's designed specifically for your active hot data, right? Absolutely minimal latency, highest performance possible in the way that storage is deployed. And we'll talk about DaaS, this term, in case you don't recognize it, direct attached storage. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail to follow. But then we have block storage, right? Again, still very high performance. It's still deployed as direct attached storage, and it is substantially lower price, particularly looking at your pricing for long-term archiving, for regulatory compliance and business continuity. It's a fundamental difference of 1.4 cents per gigabyte instead of 17 cents per gigabyte. So let me talk to you about RAID 1 and RAID 10 for a second, just in case you're not familiar. This slide kind of pops out and goes, how come NVMe is only RAID 1 and block storage is RAID 10? Well, the reality is, so RAID 1, the 1 means that it is doing automatic 2x mirroring and replication of data. And so it's just part of the routine of RAID, that it's a compliance factor of how the storage is implemented to provide value to make sure that it's not just copying one single, it's automatically doing a copy of the copy, right? So it's mirroring. The 0 means that it's also speeding up the write process. So what it's doing is a 2 times concurrent copy capability for block storage, right? With a hard disk drive, the write speeds are a little slower, like NVMe is as fast as it can get with solid state. So what they've done with the 0 in the RAID 10 is they're doubling the write times. And so why don't you have the 0 with NVMe? You don't need it, because with solid state, you're already doing multiple concurrent write operations at the same time. All right, so talking about block storage and some of the key aspects, right? So low overhead latency, predictable, optimal for virtual computing, transactional workloads. And, again, I'm trying not to read this slide, but it's, intentionally designed to be, fairly succinct here. Absolutely key capability, and a big difference between block storage and object storage is that block storage can handle incremental backups. So it's being really smart and going in and just grabbing that data that's net new from whatever time period you set it to. And then snapshot frequencies and retention periods easily aligned by use case. So, Kevin, do you want to go into a bit more detail around snapshot frequencies, retention periods?
I would be happy to. So, with how we designed our block storage, we wanted to make sure that it was sort of flexible. We wanted to make sure that for your snapshots and your retention, we wanted to give you a wide range of options. This includes either having daily backups, so every day you'll have a new backup, depending on how often you use the particular block storage, along with, and that retention lasts about 31 days. We have weekly backups, which can go on for 52 weeks. We have monthly backups that go up for 12, so you have about a solid year of monthly backups. And then finally, especially for a lot of compliance structures, we have yearly backups, which last up to 12 years. So that should cover essentially most, if not all, compliance or regulatory expectations.
Fantastic. And you just alluded to something that was kind of called out on the previous slide that I'll pick up here, is that it's really key to appreciate that what we're doing with active storage via NVMe is distinct from using block storage for backup and restore, right? So it's a different process. It can overlap the same data. Of course, you're going to include some of your active data, but it is a discrete backup and recovery routine distinct between what you're doing on block storage and what you're doing on NVMe for your active storage. Did I
Yeah,
explain that reasonably well?
yeah. So another way of being able to explain it is if you're a dashboard user, you'll be able to see it sort of in two different locations. For your NVMe backups, so for your main VM, it will be on the Manage Computers page under Snapshots tab. And then for the block storage backups, it will be on the block storage page under Manage Block Storage. And one of the things as well that we try to be very careful of and cognizant of is when you are restoring any of your backups from a block storage, we make sure to give you an option of creating a manual snapshot of that current logic that we have. So that way, everything will always be able to be saved.
Perfect. And direct attached storage. Again, this was a reasonably new term to me as I started learning more about block storage. Can you expound a little bit on the advantages and why V2 Cloud, does all of its storage via direct attached versus shared storage?
So again, one of the biggest things is flexibility. So if, for example, all my VMs are within the same region and I attach my block storage to, let's say, VM A, then the good thing about this is for whatever reason I decide to delete the particular data or delete my entire VM A, I'm still able to detach my block storage and attach it to VM B. Again, as long as it's in the same region. So we try to still give you the flexibility of being able to attach, reattach, detach your block storage to different VMs. Another good thing too is it's not shared storage, so the latency isn't necessarily being dragged by multiple different computers kind of taking information from it. It'll be attached to one computer at all times. Um, and yeah, each disk is tuned to a specific backup and retention requirement. So again, we make sure that those settings that you have for that particular block storage, regardless of which computer it's attached to, will still follow that retention period.
Terrific. And, the other really key thing that, stood out to me is just the amount of effort V2 Cloud has gone through to make sure that performance is truly blistering, right? And so no latent, even though network latency is typically quite small, right? But it's still additional latency. So by the way it's deployed, there is no network latency because it's not going over the network. Simple as that, right? So looking at a couple of additional use cases, right? So that previous use case, they're just talking about block storage in general. That's largely around your disaster recovery, your business continuity benefits, right? But you also have block storage long-term archiving, right? Largely, you're kicking in here for business continuity and compliance, as we talked about. We're going to look at a couple of the regulations really quickly in a moment. But as Kevin's already walked through, you've got granular choice of your snapshot frequencies. The regulations are typically calling out specific data, so you can isolate that specific data. You don't have to do this big, bloated, massive grab across a bunch of, oh, well, I know my audit data is sitting in this on this file server, so I'm going to back up the whole server. No, you can point it at specific data. Um, it's worm capable. Worm stands for write once, read many, for those that may not be familiar with the term. And so what that is it's a specific requirement within the regulation, a lot of regulations about data immutability, i.e., I put the known copy of that data into backup once, and nobody can mess with it after that. Right? So it is immutable. Uh, and then, as we've talked about, what's really important, you've probably heard these terms: volume, velocity, value, variety, etc. A lot of V's related to data before. And the key is to be able to, on different disks, right? So each block storage disk has its own uh, snapshot frequency and retention period policy attached to it, right? So I can use one disk, and I'm going to do that for my kind of longer term high business value data. But I'm going to back it. I'm going to do a snapshot once a day. I'm going to retain for 31 days, right? But if you have point of sale information, quite often you don't even want to risk losing a day. So for that very high volume, very high value, very high velocity data, I'm going to set it up and back that up on a different disk at a 1 hour snapshot frequency. And so just make sure that that's appreciated. You've got that granularity, and it's really that granularity that helps you build out a proper policy driven data protection framework. So, what I'm trying to get at here by business continuity, and only Toby knew that, is there's very common instances of when people depart, right? If it wasn't backed up, and you're going, well, I know that he was working on that program. Where are the files related to it? You might be on a goose hunt, and you may never find it. And then, of course, the other way people leave is quite often, all right, here's everything I've worked on, within their last few days at work. They spend the better part of a day collecting all their documents, putting them all into one place, and here's the shared drive that they're on. And then a month later, you go to look for something critical to one of your clients that came up that's supposed to be in that collection of files and isn't. Right? So backup really helps you with some of those business continuity issues as well. Right? Legal hold requirements are often overlooked. Right? So backup is going to automatically, in fact, again, as we talked about, you can point it at specific types of data. If you have specific documents that you have legal hold requirements for, absolutely point it, back it up discreetly, put it on its own disk, and know that you're protected if and when you ever have to show up in front of a judge and defend a case. And of course, it's audit ready. And within that, of course, peace of mind, right? Of just knowing that you're doing things programmatically within a framework. It's pre-orchestrated, it's pre-tested. One of the really big things, and again, I won't go into a lot of detail here, but I invite you to look in the V2 Cloud blogs and look for the blog on the release of our block storage. In that blog, I go into a lot of detail about the realities of SMB backups, and it is a mind-boggling percentage of SMBs that think they have business continuity and data resilience because they do backups. But the reality is they're not backing up nearly broadly enough. They're not backing up nearly discreetly enough. They're not backing up and aligning the type of data to the policies associated to it. And then on top of that, one of the really scary things is a majority of backups, of the restore routines fail. So they think they're covered, but they actually go to use it. And over half of attempts to restore the data the process actually fails and breaks down, right? So really cool. That's where the peace of mind comes in. So here's some of the regulations. I'm not going to go through this in detail by any means. I invite anybody viewing this that if you want to look into the specific details by industry, hit pause, have a read. Right? But the important thing to recognize, we're talking about by industry of anywhere from 3 months up to 7 years. What's often missed is that it's like, oh, this is a financial services problem or this is a healthcare problem. No, the reality is SOX applies to all public companies. Again, for specific types of data, but one of the longer retention periods is 7 years. The other thing that I was talking about earlier with Worm is this goes into some of the other aspects of the auditability, the protection of just knowing that V2 Cloud has structured the storage solution in the background in a fully compliant manner with all of the supporting technologies so that you know that it's meeting not just the retention periods that a lot of people focus on of, hey, I have to keep it for so long, but how it's kept and the protections around the storage of that data long term. And then finally, another use case, right? And I'll get Kevin to weigh in here in a moment. But what's really important is this really opens up something that clients have actually brought to us and said, you know, I'm spending a lot of money buying another high performance, higher end server so that I can create a mirror on premise of some of my critical, my compliance server, my web server, my domain controllers, etc. And I have to go through a lot of time and effort to make sure that that data is copied over. I have to set up uh, the communications routines between those boxes. I have to test the failover box to make sure it's still up and live. And then I have two pieces of hardware that are depreciating and need to be replaced at some point, right? So this is really straightforward of by doing your failover in the cloud, you're saving a lot of hardware costs, you're saving a lot of internal costs, and you know it's there reliable. And in addition to the great effort that you're doing to protect your data, you're also bringing V2 Cloud experts on board that is also, uh, applying their expertise to making sure that your data is there and ready for recovery routines and failover whenever you need it. Kevin, anything you'd add to that?
No, I think you covered all of it very, very well. I think one of the important notes too is that one of the reasons why so many organizations move over to the cloud is because we have these failovers already in place. So, an important note too is anything related to block storage, as long as you're saving the data within the block storage, then it's on the cloud organization to make sure that we keep that data ready and willing for you whenever you need it.
Perfect. Well said. And with that, I thank everybody. Really appreciate you tuning in. Next steps, interested in following up, hello at V2 Cloud. Couldn't be simpler. We monitor it. Again, if you know us, V2 Cloud as a company, you know that we love personal interactions and we're actually really responsive about it. And then, as I mentioned before, have a visit to v2cloud.com. Look specifically for the blogs and the other content, discrete page that's on our backup, disaster recovery, and block storage capabilities. Thanks again, Kevin. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Thank you, everyone.